Why didn't the Roman Empire conquer the world? You've heard me say it before. Rome wasn't built in a day. But that doesn't mean they weren't trying to take over the world in one. From the 3rd century BC to the 3rd century AD, the Roman Republic, and later the Roman Empire, conquered most of the Mediterranean, but there were limits to their expansion. Reasons why they didn't try and conquer the entire planet. In this video, we're going to look at 3 reasons why the Romans didn't conquer the world. Hello and welcome to Rose History Channel. Now we can think of all sorts of reasons why the Romans didn't go global, like the lack of a global perspective, the lack of a navy, or because they were too darn lazy. But all of these reasons are either too simplistic or not true. The Roman Empire was vast. They had a massive army that at its peak contained 500,000 soldiers, not to mention a well-developed road system that allowed for quick movement of troops across the empire, not to mention Rome did have a navy, though admittedly not as large as some of their contemporaries. And besides, size isn't everything. The Roman legions were some of the most well-trained fighting forces in the ancient world. Discipline, tactics, and technology made them a force to be reckoned with. So if Rome could steamroll entire armies with relative ease, why didn't they just keep rolling? Well, there were limits to Roman power. The first reason is geography. Simply put, there were areas that were difficult, if not impossible, for the Romans to conquer. I'm talking about places like Siberia, the Sahara, and the Australian outback. These places were simply too big, too frozen, too hot, or too empty to be worth conquering. There was little to no economic or strategic value to these regions. So, the Romans didn't even bother trying to conquer them. The second reason is that the Romans weren't really that ambitious. Okay, maybe ambitious isn't the right word. It's more accurate to say that they were pragmatic. Rome wasn't in the business of conquering useless land. They wanted to acquire territory that was economically beneficial. In other words, they wanted land that could make them money. This is why the Roman Empire was mostly confined to the Mediterranean. Outside of this region, there were few areas that the Romans considered worth conquering. Finally, we have the third reason, and perhaps the most important, why the Romans didn't conquer the world. They simply couldn't. As much as Rome loved money, they weren't totally without scruples. There were limits to how much they would exploit their subjects. While the Romans did practice slavery, they didn't enslave everyone. In fact, most of the people in the Roman Empire were free. They were subjects of Rome, but they were allowed to keep their freedom and autonomy as long as they paid their taxes and followed Roman law. The Roman Empire also had a policy of religious tolerance. You could worship whatever you wanted as long as you didn't get in the way of the emperor. The point is, the Romans weren't so power-hungry that they would try and conquer everyone. They knew when they were in too hostile or too remote an area to bother trying to conquer. To be clear, the Romans didn't totally avoid violence. They went to war all the time, but they were very careful not to overextend themselves. They knew the limits of their power, and they never pushed it too far. So there you have it, 3 reasons why the Romans didn't conquer the world. They didn't want to. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please subscribe.